Something big is brewing for the Toronto Maple Leafs as we have a massive new trade update that has dropped from an insider surrounding a player in particular that not only is super intriguing, but has huge implications going forward as Brad Treliving continues to prepare for a big trade. We'll write that down as well as discuss a few other updates on this episode. You don't want to stay tuned till the end of this one, but before we get into it all, if you're a part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, quick reminder to hit that subscribe button. Folks, a lot to go over today, and obviously we're going to be talking about some trade talks today. Some new reports have dropped in the Leafs. They are having some success. They're 4-1 in their last 5 games, and some new reports have dropped surrounding a face that we haven't spoken about too much on the channel, and not a lot of people are talking about him. And let's dive right into it. Let's not waste any more time as David Pagnotta came out and recently revealed that Blake Coleman is not only up for a trade, but he's a player that a lot of these contending teams are also going to look at. And Darius, we know that Brad Treliving at this point in time, I mean, he's trying to make a trade, right? That's no secret, whether that be in the form of a Nick Robertson trade or something else. They're trying to make a move for at least a more established top six forward, and they've been juggling the lines. We saw it in our video earlier today. There's a lot of things happening here, but Blake Coleman is a name that supposedly, you can see here, hearing a lot more about him, and that they're also, the Flames potentially shopping guys like Rasmus Anderson. I mean, we heard Nazem Kadri, Blake Coleman again here, Mackenzie Weegar. This is a team in the Flames that can at least expect a fire sale to happen. And there's been some rumblings lately about the Leafs being extremely interested in a guy like Blake Coleman. Darius, what are your thoughts on this? What are your thoughts on the report? And quite frankly, it makes some sense that the Flames are going to be in sell mode. They're having a pretty disastrous season.
Yeah, they have not started well, and I think that they could be in sell mode. And I think a lot of people were expecting them to come into this season to performing a little bit better than even last season, and they really, weren't that bad last season. They obviously have Dustin Wolf in net now, and who's fantastic. So a lot of people were expecting to be better. Doesn't look like it's going to be that way. So they could end up being sellers, and that includes a guy like Blake Coleman, who we'll get to his contract in a second, does have another year on his deal. And not only that, the connection, of course, with Brad Treliving once again, and obviously the connection with the Flames and the Leafs that, maybe they don't even want to make a trade with the Leafs, but we're still going to talk about it. But I think this signals something more than just Blake Coleman, because I think that he could fit in on this team. But I think it signals that something big is brewing for the Leafs because, we know that they're trying to trade Nick Robertson. It's one of the worst kept secrets right now. And I don't know if they're necessarily shopping him or showcasing him right now. I think that he's actually just playing well for the team, and that's why he's getting the opportunities that he's getting. But we know that they're trying to shop him and David Kampf, and David Kampf's contract might actually get terminated in the next day or two here. So they're going to free up some more cap space. And one thing that I think is interesting, if you look years ago, maybe 5, 6 years ago, one thing that Kyle Dubas was doing when he was GM of the team is he said, we need more depth and we need older guys with experience. And who was he bringing in, Nick? He was bringing in Joe Thornton, Wayne Simmons, Patrick Marleau. I mean, maybe Patrick Marleau wasn't necessarily Kyle Dubas, but, guys like that, older guys, but those guys never won the Stanley Cup. They don't know what it took to win the Stanley Cup. And here comes Brad Treliving in the door. He brings in Steven Lorentz. He brings in your new goaltender who's won a Stanley Cup. Like a couple guys here, and OEL, who won the Stanley Cup recently and know what it takes to win. Blake Coleman is another guy like that with ties to Brad Treliving. So I think that's why it could make sense. I think that, the Leafs are playing musical chairs right now. And yes, they haven't had a great start to the season. That could be why. But they're playing with a lot of different combinations and guys playing with different guys, throughout the lineup. I think they're trying to figure out what the right mix is and who could be on the way out throughout this season. So they could go out and possibly make a trade here for Blake Coleman. And I think it does make sense. We'll get into the specifics in a second, like his contract, which is pretty hefty.
Yeah, he's obviously the assistant captain for the Flames, so there is some other intangible things that have to be taken into consideration. Brad Treliving likes making trades for people with control. Brandon Carlo last year, Scott Laughton, he is under control until 2027, so it's another year after this one. And let's dive into his stats here. Obviously, played with the Flames for the majority of his career, has had his best season under Brad Treliving. Last year, in 82 games, 39 points. The year before, 54 points. He's a couple years removed from a 30-goal season. Now, if you're looking at this and saying, who else did the Leafs acquire that was a couple years removed from having a good year? You look at Michelli, very different players. Obviously, Coleman has won a Stanley Cup with Lightning back-to-back. And, of course, also, is at a point now where, Blake Coleman's a more experienced player than Michelli. But at the same time and in the same vein, I like Blake Coleman a lot here. This season, he's already up to 6 goals. Now, is he the solution in the top 6? Maybe, maybe not, but he wouldn't in theory cost a ton. His cap hit's $4.9 million, which means you would have to make things work. And I think a framework involving this would be, Nick Robertson, you'd think would have to be involved there. Like that seems like a player now where his value is pretty high. The Flames will probably want at least him and more in a deal for Blake Coleman. So you obviously have to evaluate the actual, interest for, the team here. But he's having a decent start to the year thus far as well. He's already up to 5 goals, and last year in 82 games he only put up 15, so he's on pace for a lot more than that, over 30 goals, around 30 goals. He's on pace for. So, Darius, what are your thoughts on that? You can look at some of his, the shot charts here. Things are interesting.
Yeah, and I wanted to bring up the shot chart because look where he shoots from. He goes to the net. He goes to the net, right? This is more of what the Leafs need because for, a lot of the time and especially, certain games this season, even in the past, the Leafs are a perimeter team. They like to play with their food on the perimeter and there's no substance there. You're not going to do anything there. So Blake Coleman likes to go to the front of the net. That's where he likes to shoot from. That's where he scores the majority of his goals. So I think that it could make some sense. If you're looking at the David Kampf situation, you could free up $2.4 million here against the cap, although you're already saving some right now with him being down with the Marlies. So you're going to free up a little bit more. If Nick Robertson goes the other way in this trade, which I think actually does make sense in terms of return and what Calgary would want in the direction of the team, that makes sense. You're freeing up more salary cap space in that way. Maybe there's retained salary and you figure out the rest of the deal. Now we're talking. Now you're in this, similar situation, at least cap wise, to where you are right now. So I think that they could make this work. Is he the solution in the top six? No, I don't think so. But he's another guy who's won the Stanley Cup, plays a physical caliber of hockey, can chip in for goals, like you said. Like he's on pace. Of course, he's playing probably higher in the lineup than he would be with the Leafs in Calgary. But I think this could make a lot of sense for the Leafs and adding more guys who know what it takes to win and, are on a mission to win. So I think that's very valuable to have within the team. And listen, I think by the trade deadline, they're going to slowly, with some of the moves that they're looking to make, including probably another move for a top six forward, pushing guys like Easton Cowan out of the lineup. And you're going to need that depth. You go through injuries in the playoffs and down the stretch. And I mean, Scott Laughton's only making his season debut tomorrow at this point. So you need that depth at times. So I feel like guys are going to be pushed out of the lineup anyway. So to me, it makes sense. He's the type of player that they could use, at least in the bottom of the lineup, that can score, is responsible defensively, plays physical, knows what it takes to win. It does make some sense to me.
Yeah, and obviously he's on pace. I said 30. I undershot him. He's on pace for over 40 goals this year if you take his prorated numbers. So very interesting. Some other names to keep an eye out on. We think back to October 22nd. Like there's been reports for a while now. Of course, this one's brand new regarding Blake Coleman, but a lot of interesting ways here. And looking at his playoff stats, you mentioned it. He is a pretty good playoff performer. Like obviously with the Calgary Flames in 2021, he put up 5 points in 12 games, something special, but he's not going to be, he's a complimentary player. He's a role player. It's not going to be someone who needs to carry the team. And if you can just add some sort of production into this, into this lineup, you see this lineup that's projected to go tomorrow here. You imagine Blake Coleman in there somewhere, obviously maybe replacing Nick Robertson's spot in the second line or moving things around, playing musical chairs here, which is what Craig Berube has done all year. Things could get very interesting, especially knowing that probably won't cost an absolute truckload. And that's something that clearly Brad Treliving is, being patient and being careful with because of how much assets and how many assets rather they gave, in the last, few months here at the trade deadline last year. But that'll wrap it up. Let's let down below what your thoughts are. See you guys later.